He was the greatest fear of the ancient Egyptians. Apep, called Apophis by the Greeks, is the active, expansive aspect of chaos, a being that consumes everything in its path, threatening everything that exists, that wants to turn all creation to nothingness. Moving alone through the waters of the dark, cosmic primordial ocean, Nun, it's constantly seeking a way to break into the bright, visible world, the Nemesis orbiting the world, ceaselessly threatening its delicate structure, attacking with particular ferocity light and its source. Apep is a giant serpent that chases the sun, a manifestation of the great creator of the world, its defender. Apep attacks him when he's the most feeble, when during the nocturnal journey on its barque, the sun traverses the cosmic realm of Duat, the land of the dead, where he regenerates and is reborn in an endless cycle. If, according to the Egyptian panentheistic vision of the world, all deities only represent the many aspects of the great creator god, then the servants of chaos, the countless malevolent demons, are merely manifestations of Apep, who was referred to as the most evil, the fallen one, the fiercest of face, the dark one, but above all, the rebel. He is the greatest enemy of the cosmic, social and political order, that is mad. For the ancient Egyptians, Apep largely played the role that was later assigned to him by their Christian descendants, the Copts, who clearly identified him with the biblical Satan. Were they right? Hello everyone, my name's Irena. Welcome to my channel Ancient Sites Girl. I invite you to a podcast about the history of ancient Egypt. Today I'll tell you about the serpent Apep. Where did in pharaonic Egypt originate the belief in evil as an entity? What was his connection with the dark age of the first intermediate period? What were the mysterious magical rituals against the enemy of the sun? Rituals performed commonly throughout Egypt, every day, constantly. What do the pharaonic funeral texts tell us about him? To answer these questions, we will reach, as usual, for the original ancient texts. Eschatology concerning the concept of death and the afterlife is the most extensive subject that Egyptian theologians were dealing with for over 3,000 years. Hence, the vast majority of religious texts and iconography concern this topic. Among the pharaonic inquiries into the posthumous existence of man, the most important were the Osirian and solar concepts. The former focused on the vegetation cycles, the flooding of the Nile, and the rebirth of plants as a natural source of belief in resurrection. The second, solar concept, complementing the former, focused on the daily course of the sun in the sky. Every evening, the Egyptians witnessed the death of the disappearing behind the horizon sun, which in their eyes was a manifestation of the great god. The sun, swallowed by his heavenly mother Nut, was drawn into the dark expanse of the primeval ocean Nun, or sailed, as it was believed, on his barque into the mysterious, starry, multidimensional realm, the land of the dead, called Duat. At the end of this nocturnal journey, the god was reborn again in the womb of his cosmic mother. The sun disk rising in the morning symbolized the constantly repeating act of creation, the miracle of the rebirth of the universe, and victory over death. Death of man as a condition for renewal and eternal life is presented positively in funeral texts. Prepared for the pharaohs, the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom assured of the triumphant entry of their souls into the land of the dead. As sons of the sun, the rulers joined the retinue of the Creator, becoming crew members of his solar barque. The vessel was called Manjat when the god traveled across the sky in his visible form. The night solar barque they called Mesektet. However, it's one thing to enter the path to eternity, but quite another to complete it successfully. Both the dead and the sun itself had to guard against the countless dangers they would encounter on their journey through the Duat. It's these threats accompanying death that constitute the main concern of ancient Egyptian theologians. At the end of the Old Kingdom, the new religion of Osiris promised rebirth after death to all believing Egyptians, rebirth in the god of the dead. However, to become Osiris, one must survive in the inhospitable environment of the afterlife. The best guarantee of life after death was to accompany the sun god on this journey. Funeral books, spells, and instructions with which the dead were supplied armed them with strong magical powers, almost equal to their divine co-crew members. Demons guarding the following regions of the Duat to which the solar barque sailed were to yield before these spells. The Amduat, which is Book of What is in the Underworld, or Text of the Hidden Chamber, for the original text was believed to be in a secret place within the Duat itself. It was composed exclusively for the pharaohs during the Second Intermediate Period and was in use throughout the 18th dynasty. It's divided into 12 sections corresponding to the 12 hours of the night. According to the book, the first hours of this journey seem to pass peacefully. Despite their terrible appearance, the demons guarding the next gates to the afterlife let the barque proudly sail past. It's welcomed by the crowds of inhabitants of the kingdom of Osiris gathering on the shore. In the 4th hour, however, there's no water in the river, and from then on, the barque must be pulled by the souls of the dead. It reaches the desert land of Sokar, the god of the Memphite necropolises. There is complete darkness here, so one can see the creatures inhabiting it, and according to the text, these are mainly snakes, lots of snakes. The barque itself also turns into a serpent to move easier through the sandy terrain. In the 5th hour, during the journey through the desert, the sun god begins to transform into his new form. In the illustrations of this hour, we see the Creator in his most primordial form, before the moment of creation. It's symbolized by the winged serpent. Snakes surround the regenerating sun on all sides. In the eyes of the Egyptians, they undoubtedly symbolized the most primordial forms of existence. This is the moment of repetition of Zeb Tepi, the first time. The illustrations of the 5th hour of the Amduat also show a scarab emerging from behind the primeval land, which will soon become a new, childlike form of the sun. In the 6th hour, the souls of the dead and the gods gather around the barque to protect the young sun, Khepri, the one who comes into being, from the greatest danger that will inevitably come. In the 7th hour, the barque reaches the titular hidden chamber, a dark, sandy cave through which it can no longer even be towed. This is the most dangerous moment of the journey, decisive for the further fate of the universe. The sun now enters the region inhabited by its eternal enemy, Apep. In this fragment of Amduat, he is called of the terrible face, Nehachra. A gigantic serpent lies in wait for the Creator. He's on a sandbank in the middle of a dried-up riverbed. The sandbank, according to the description, covers an area of 440 by 440 cubits, which is over 220 meters long and as wide. The entire area is filled with the coils of Apep's gigantic body, which gives an idea of its size. To stop the divine barque, the monster drank all the water from the river. At the sight of its eternal enemy, the serpent raises its head and lets out a terrifying roar. But the great god is prepared for battle. The naos of his barque is then transformed into the giant serpent Mehen, the defender of the sun, and on the prow of his barque miraculously appears the great of magic, Isis, accompanied by Heka himself, the primordial power shaping the universe, who is also the source of all magic. Earlier texts, but also the later Ramessid ones, put the mighty Seth in their place, to which we'll return later. Thanks to Isis and Heka, there is no direct clash. Through their magic, the barque bypasses Apep. The spells of the crew weaken the force of the most powerful demon. We read, Apep shall be turned back and shall be shut up in Ament, in the hidden place of the Duat. If they be uttered on the earth, it shall be so likewise. Whosoever shall utter them shall become one of those who are in the boat of Ra, both in heaven and upon earth. But whosoever knoweth not these figures shall not know how to repulse Nehachra. The minor gods, armed with knives, throw themselves at the weakened demon. Some tie him with ropes, others cut his enormous body into pieces, so Apep is forced to throw up all the water of the river he had previously drunk, which allows the god to continue his voyage, now shown in 4 forms: Atum, Khepri, Ra, Osiris. The taming of Apep means the fall of his servants, the countless demons whose slaughter is now taking place. From then on, the god's journey for the next 5 hours of the night is peaceful, but that's not the end of the troubles. Inexplicably, the eternal enemy of the sun will return at the last moment, just before sunrise, to prevent it from rising in the morning. As in the 7th hour Apep wanted to prevent the regeneration of the dead sun, now he wants to stop its birth. In the final battle, Apep is defeated by the army of goddesses armed with fire-spitting snakes, as depicted by the illustrators of the Amduat. Once again, the enemy is bound, cut into pieces, and burned, which will stop his endless attacks, at least for a few hours. The sunrise in the morning means the defeat of primordial darkness and chaos, but the Egyptians believed that the victory of good over evil, life over death, can't be taken for granted. So they trembled for the fate of the dead sun and constantly increased its strength with their daily rituals. In the tomb of the last ruler of the 18th dynasty, Horemheb, appears a new funeral book, the Book of Gates, and will remain an inseparable element of Ramessid royal burials. It's also divided into 12 parts, corresponding to the hours of the sun's nocturnal journey through the Duat. It's famous for its illustration entitled The Defeat of Apep. In the 3rd hour, we see the creator god Atum leaning on staff, standing before the defeated wavy serpent, and uttering the spell. You shall walk upside down. You shall not rise. You shall be cursed so that you will not find yourself. There are no such dramatic descriptions here as in the Amduat, but the Book of Gates is characterized by the omnipresence of snakes, representing both the inhabitants of the Duat and the very nature of the afterlife. Snake goddesses guard the gates here, which were often depicted in the form of snakes. The stars sit on serpentine thrones, and the mummies of the dead rest on bed serpents. Time and space are also symbolized in the Book of Gates by giant snakes. But let's return to Apep. In the 4th hour, the mummified dead together hold back the hostile serpent so that their lord, the sun god, can continue his journey without any disruption. Characteristic of the Book of Gates is the enigmatic image from the 6th hour of the night. It depicts a group of deities carrying a giant serpent from which 12 human heads protrude. Behind them follows a line of figures carrying sticks, forked at the ends for catching serpents. The images are accompanied by the text. O heads, swallow him who swallowed you. Ra commands, repel Apep, so that the heads that are in him may come out. Bizarre images are accompanied by bizarre descriptions. Here, at Ra's call, the heads of his victims emerged from the serpent's body and begin to obediently devour their tormentor. They do this until Ra passes the mutilated Apep. We read, "This snake has no eyes, no nose, and no ears. It breathes its own roar, lives its own voice." Apep strikes again around the 10th hour of the night, this time not alone but in alliance with another enemy of the sun, the great crocodile Shes. At that time they are opposed by a whole group of spear-armed deities and a giant mysterious figure rising from the ground. It has the form of an androgynous mummy with a sun disk on its head and is described as the Old One. Perhaps it's the bodily form of the great creator god Atum. The battle continues for the last 2 hours of the night. Ultimately, Apep is robed by the goddess Serket. Serket, depicted with a scorpion on her head, played an important role as a guardian of the dead due to her traditional protective functions against all poisonous animals, including snakes, and as we know, there were plenty of snakes in the afterlife. Other gods participate in tying up Apep and his helpers. In the illustration of the 12th hour, we see Apep floating in the air, but held by ropes by the 4 sons of Horus. We read, "Hey, rebel, Apep is bound, he whose evil is inflicted. Your face is destroyed, O Apep. Take the way to the slaughtering block, for knives are against you, so that you are beheaded. The eldest one is against you, so that you are destroyed. Those with the spears throw their magic against you. They do not let this serpent approach the barque of the great god." His fate was sealed. Apep will be cut into pieces by a special group called the 9 Gods who punish Apep. Victory is confirmed by the rising sun, of course. But as long as the morning sun is still a child, uncertainty about his fate remains. Moving across the sky and on the borders of the horizon, Apep could, as it was believed, also attack during the day. Solar eclipses were interpreted as the victory of the demon who had just swallowed the solar barque. It's not difficult to imagine what panic this phenomenon must have caused among the ancient Egyptians. Only the sun at its zenith, radiating the most, is the triumphant sun, in full strength, so noon is the time of Maat, burning with anger, when Apep is defeated and harmony is restored in the sky. Ra's victory is never final, however. The father of all evil, the serpent Apep, isn't completely destroyed. He still lurks in the darkness of the night, and constantly tries to destroy the solar barque traveling through the afterlife. He also leaves the seed of rebellion in the hearts of gods and men, who often with their improper behavior caused the temporary departure of mud and the return of chaos. Therefore, according to the Egyptians, human sin, disobedience and pride could cause even a cosmic catastrophe, hence couldn't be tolerated either in this or the next world. They believed, however, that as long as their kings reign, the living gods endowed with the mud by their solar parent, the forces of evil will not flood the bright world. And when the time comes when they are gone, then the order of the world will fall. The forces of Apep and the waters of chaos will invade it, causing a return to the state of nothingness. At about the same time as the Book of the Amduat was written, the Book of the Dead appeared, the most popular funerary text of Egypt, used not only by rulers but also by ordinary Egyptians up until Roman times. The authors of the Book of the Dead drew heavily on much earlier traditions, known to us primarily from the coffin texts, but also from the pyramid text, which describe the serpent Rerek, the enemy of the sun and thus of the dead ruler. Somewhere near the eastern horizon of the sky is a mountain, the seat of the serpent Rerek. In the Book of the Dead we read, "O Isis, too distant to be seen, his breath is like a fire, and there is a serpent, Rerek his name. His back is 7 cubits long, and he feeds on the blessed spirits, annihilating their magic power. Turn back, O Rerek, who art in Isis, biting with his mouth and hypnotizing with his eye. Your teeth will be broken and your poison weakened." An extremely similar scene is found in the hundreds of years older spell 160 of the coffin texts. Apep, who is on his mountain, a gigantic serpent with a head made of flint, turns his gaze towards Ra, hypnotizing the entire crew of the solar barque. This requires the intervention of Seth, who frees the boat, addressing the serpent with the following words: "You who see from afar, just close your eye. I have ensnared you. I am a robust male. Cover your head." In the Book of the Dead, Apep is once again tamed by Seth, who orders him to leave the eastern part of the heavens and move to the depths of the afterworld, where he'll be slaughtered by the gods. Quote, "Spell for repelling the Rerek serpent in the realm of the dead. You back Apep, enemy of Ra, to the place where the Father ordered that I do slaughtering you. Go down, Apep, enemy of Ra. Punishment is on you, who are hated by Ra. Move well, no evil obstacle has gone out from your mouth. I am Seth, who clears the turbulence of the storm. Ra is justified against Apep." The reciter here identifies himself as Seth. Seth, who appears here as the defender of the sun god, has nothing in common with the Seth, the villain from the Osirian myth, where we meet him as the annihilator of Osiris and the antagonist of Horus in his fight for the throne of his father. Here, Seth stands with a spear on the bow of the solar barque, bravely pushing away the eternal enemy of Ra, Apep. Dominating natural phenomena, he mercilessly hurls thunderbolts at him. The ancient Egyptians were convinced that the stormy thunders above their heads were the sounds of this fight. The violent and immoral Seth, however, isn't treated on an equal footing with the other crew members of the solar barque. According to the Book of the Dead, he's kept isolated, under guard, so that he doesn't arouse fear among other gods, especially Osiris. According to this version of the myth, Seth was treated by Ra as an effective but terrible weapon, released only as a last resort in the face of the defeat that threatened the clash with Apep. According to the Book of the Dead, after the victorious battle, Seth became offensive to Ra, threatening that if he wasn't treated well, he would bring storms and thunder to the sun god. In revenge, Ra and his entourage expelled him from the barque and continued without him. The portrayal of the figure of Seth in a bad light, already in the times of the New Kingdom, was of course a consequence of the constant growth in popularity of the Osirian myths. Responsible for that were also the Hyksos, occupying Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period. They invaded the Nile Delta in the 17th century BC and controlled a large part of Egyptian territory for 100 years. The Hyksos, ruling from Avaris, chose Seth as the patron deity of their 15th dynasty. Unfortunately for Seth, probably 2 Hyksos pharaohs took the name Apophis, belonging to Apep. So in the eyes of the Egyptians, the invaders appeared as obvious servants of chaos, and perhaps from then on they began to look upon the ancient Seth with distrust. But his cult experienced an unexpected renaissance in the 13th century BC, when he became the patron deity of the kings of the 19th dynasty, initiated by Ramses I, whose son took the name Seti, belonging to Seth. In chapter 108 of the Book of the Dead, we've got already known to us the scene of Apep stopping the night barque by drinking all the water from the river. We read, "Then Seth is to fend him off with a lance of metal, to force him to spew out all he swallowed. Then Seth is to set him in his grip, and then he is to speak in magic. Back, so that the sailing may be smooth, sing far. I am the great in magic, son of Nut. My light power is given to me against you. The snake that walks on its belly, his strength is at his bond. See me, gone against you, your strength is with me. I have come to assault the earth snakes for Ra, so that he might be content with me in the evening as I circle this sky, while you are in chains. I know the procedure of the things for which Apep is punished." These fragments of the Book of the Dead are borrowed from the Middle Kingdom coffin texts, which provide information about Apep. The pyramid texts, however, don't mention him at all. But why? The etymological, historical, and mythological origins of Apep are unknown. The belief in the existence of evil as an entity, as one of the factors shaping Egyptian ethics, most likely existed already in the good times of the Old Kingdom. At that time, the religious and social concept of Maat triumphed when society eagerly united around the funeral cult of its kings. However, it's only after the end of the Pyramid Age that we learn about Apep for the first time. Was he a projection of the fear of Egyptians affected by the existential crisis of the First Intermediate Period? These were terrible times of civilizational regression, political anarchy, low Nile floods, drought, and famine. The oldest known mention of the so-called sandbank of Apep, and the oldest text mentioning Apep's name at all, was found in the tomb of Ankhtifi, probably from the 22nd century BC. He was a nomarch of Nekhen, also known as Hierakonpolis, City of Hawks, and a supporter of local 10th dynasty ruler. In his tomb in El Mu'alla, Ankhtifi placed an autobiographical text which reads, "I took care of the towns of Hefat and Hormar in every situation of crisis, when the sky was clouded and the earth was parched. and when everybody died of hunger on this sandbank of Apep. The south came with its people and the north with its children. They brought finest oil in exchange for the barley which was given to them. The whole of Upper Egypt died of hunger, and each individual had reached such a state of hunger that he ate his own children. But I refused to see anyone die of hunger and gave to the north grain of Upper Egypt. Surprisingly consistently in Egyptian funeral texts recurs the motif of a barque running aground on a sandbank due to Apep. Could this motif have its source in historical events? The sandbank of Apophis, also called the sandbank of the turtle, was the name they gave to the low water level in the Nile. In a broader sense, it meant hunger, death, unrest. Isfet, as the Egyptians called chaos. The years of low water level in the Nile were called years of sandbanks. These sandbanks probably resembled turtles in their shape. The turtle was one of Apep's iconographic attributes. As part of the New Year's holiday, the birth of Sothis, that is the heliacal rising of Sirius, which heralded the flooding of the Nile, the Egyptians joyfully and with relief cried out, "The turtle is dead, Ra came to life." Apep was always depicted in a reptilian form. He was sometimes a turtle, sometimes a crocodile, but most often he was depicted as a giant snake. Often on reliefs and paintings illustrating funeral books, we see a serpent pierced with knives, cut into pieces, or under divine control. Thanks to such measures, these images couldn't give power to the hated demon. He always remained in the sphere of taboo, like a deep fear that wasn't to be evoked. However, his snake images were made according to a relatively regular pattern. Some believe the model for artistic depictions of Apep may have been the giant Central African rock python, which could grow up to 6 meters, 20 feet. But the blotches on Apep's skin seem more consistent with the javelin sand boa, which still inhabits North Africa today. As we know, the snake symbolized the primordial form of existence. In the Book of the Dead, the creator Atum prophetically assures Osiris of the inevitable end of time, when the entire creation will once again immerse itself in the cosmic waters of chaos, in which only he himself and Osiris, symbolizing the dead souls, will remain. For eternity they will then traverse the vastness of Nun in the form of giant serpents. The primal ocean Nun itself, according to the Hermopolitan theologians, even before the first time Zep-Tepi, was supposed to have creative potential. This potential was symbolized by the pre-deities of the Duat, 4 pairs of different aspects of the primal ocean, such as fluidity, invisibility, darkness, and unboundedness. The male members of the Duat were depicted as frogs, the female as snakes. When the male and female elements finally met, they triggered a mysterious impulse that led to the awakening of the self-awareness of Atum, the great creator god, until then incomplete and floating helplessly on the waters of Nun. From then on, there was an explosion of creation in which the primordial ocean had its role, or rather its part. From that part that remained dark, cold, and barren, Apep was to be somehow born. He was either always its part or came into being at the time of Zep-Tepi, being Atum's contemporary and his opposite at the same time. The most extensive text on the origin of Apep is found in a cosmological text carved on the columns of the Yesna temple from Roman times. The theologians of Esna considered Amun-ra to be the great demiurge god, and at the same time Neith played this role as his female aspect. One of the texts describes Neith's self-birth from the primeval ocean Nun, her transformation into the heavenly cow, the creation of the first land, and finally, the birth of the sun. We read, "Then she discarded the umbilical cord of her son, whom she had made within the water, so that it came to be as a snake of 120 cubits, while he was called Apep, and his heart created rebellion against Ra, along with his confederacy that came forth from his eye." Previous translations of this text have been proven to be incorrect. Egyptologists believed for a long time that Apep was created from the saliva of the goddess Neith, who at the moment of creation was said to have spat him into the waters of Nun. The identification of Apep as the umbilical cord of Ra explains Apep's serpentine form. Older, late-period texts comparing him to an umbilical cord have been shown not to be insults, but literal descriptions of the demon's mythological genesis. The famous Meterni Stela of the 4th century BC clearly identifies Apep with the umbilical cord of the creator, on which he is called. Apep, that umbilical cord of Ra, that intestine of the viscera. Indirect evidence that the identification of Apep with the umbilical cord of Ra occurred much earlier, already in the New Kingdom, is provided by the Book of the Dead. Quote, "My wrongdoing has been removed. My evil has been done away with." What is that? It means that navel cord was cut. The evil that adhered to me has been cast away. What is that? It means that I am cleansed on the day of my birth. Evil, therefore, didn't appear only later with the rebellion of humanity or the crime of Seth against Osiris. For the Egyptians, evil has always accompanied the universe, but not as its component element. It was like a foreign being, an intruder, hostile to all creation. Here begins the book of the felling of Apep, the foe of Ra and the foe of King Onophoris, the Justified, which is performed daily in the temple of Amun-ra, Lord of the thrones of the two lands, who dwells in Karnak. With these words begins the famous book of overthrowing Apep, part of an ancient Egyptian manuscript known as the Breer Rind papyrus, written around 300 BC. Each section of the book consists of a series of formulas and spells, as well as instructions for the successful performance of a ritual. The power of the spells was strengthened by symbolic destruction of a wax figure of the evil serpent, or by burning a sheet of papyrus with its name and image. Quote, "This spell is to be recited over an image of Apophis drawn on a new sheet of papyrus in green ink, and over a figure of Apophis in red wax. See, his name is inscribed on it in green ink." The figurines are made according to the instructions in the last section of the book of Apep, the names of Apophis. We read, "See, their names written on their breasts, having been made of wax, and also bound with bonds of black rope, spat upon them, to be trampled with the left foot, to be fallen with the spear and knife, to be placed on the fire in the melting furnace of the coppersmiths." The book contains the following descriptive chapters: spitting on Apep, desecrating Apep with the left foot, taking a lance to strike Apep, binding Apep, taking a knife to strike Apep, setting Apep on fire. The magician first ceremoniously spits on the wax figure. Spitting on the image of Apep indicates very clearly total contempt and rejection, how characteristic for the Egyptians, symbolic humiliation of the enemy, who in their eyes certainly doesn't deserve a quick and unceremonious execution. Then he tramples, stabs, and ties the figure, and finally places it in the fire. We read, "He is to be burnt in a fire, and his remains placed in a pot of urine and pounded up into one mass. Thou shalt do accordingly at the 6th hour of the night and at the 8th hour of the day, placing Apep on the fire and spitting on him very often at the beginning of every hour of the day until the turning of the shadow." Among the Egyptians, the burnt offering was always associated with deliberate destruction, the ultimate punishment, and applied only to enemies. This was how sinners were punished in the afterlife, enemies of Osiris, according to, for example, the Ramessid funeral text, Book of Caverns. The pits of fire described in that book served probably as inspiration for later ritual furnaces erected near temples, intended for wax and papyrus images of the hated serpent. This is the fate of Apep and his associates, their offspring, their shadows and souls, forever. We read, "Fall upon thy face, O Apep, thou foe of Ra. The fire which issues from the eye of Horus comes forth against thee. The great flame which issues from the eye of Horus comes forth against thee. It presses on thee with a blast of flame. The fire comes forth against thee, and fierce is its flame against thy soul, thy spirit, thy magic, thy body, and thy shade. The mistress of burning has power over thee. Her fiery blast makes chastisement in thy soul. She annihilates thy shape. She chastises thy form. And thou art fallen to the eye of Horus, which is enraged against its foe." Some researchers believe that the ritual is much older and may even date back to the Middle Kingdom. If this is true, then perhaps these enigmatic, not always understandable to us, twist of events described in older funeral books are in fact a reflection of the liturgy. Rituals were performed to ensure the prosperity of the world and to prevent its collapse. In the morning, at noon, and in the evening, and in some temples even constantly, the ritual of Apep was recited. Through this ritual, not only the cosmic enemy was struck, but at the same time the troubles and rebellions and the political enemies of the pharaoh. The recitation ends with a constantly repeated comparison. Just as the cosmic enemies in heaven, so too the political enemies of order on earth will be trampled and rejected. Come to Pharaoh is the appeal to the sun god, and drive away his enemies just as he strikes down Apep for you and punishes evil. A later text makes this political reference even more obvious. If the ceremonies for Osiris are neglected in their time in this place, then the land will be robbed of its rights, and the commoners will abandon its masters, for there are no commands for the mob. If the head of the enemy is not cut off, which is before you of wax, papyrus, or wood, according to the rules of the ritual, the foreign nations will rise up against Egypt and civil war and revolt will break out throughout the land. The king will not be obeyed in his palace, and the land will be deprived of its defensive strength. The ceremony of destroying Apep took place every day, as is clearly stated at the beginning of the Book of Apep. The frequent performance of the ritual reflects the daily struggle between Apep and the sun god in the Duat. The ritual had a preventive role, protecting the daily journey of the sun god and the kingship of his earthly representative, who establishes and preserves Maat. But there were also more practical reasons. To reduce the force of violent weather conditions, such as storms or heavy rains, which were considered manifestations of Apep or Seth. This particular outcome of the ritual is well emphasized in the book of Apep. Then you shall do this likewise, when the clouds bruise at the east of the sky and when Ra sets in the west, in order to prevent the storm from growing in the east of the sky. Therefore you shall do this likewise very often. You shall prevent the storm from growing in the sky, so that the sun god may shine, and Apep be felt truly. Harsh weather conditions were traditionally associated with Seth, but in the late period he came to be identified with Apep, and they took on each other's functions. Although the popularity of Seth as the slayer of Apep reached its peak in the Ramessid period, it soon suffered a rapid decline. In the Third Intermediate Period, that is from the 11th to the 7th centuries BC, when the unification of Osirian and solar eschatology finally took place, Seth, as the enemy of Osiris, also began to play the role of the enemy of the sun, and in the late period he underwent a complete demonization. He was commonly identified with the serpent Apep in Ptolemaic times, and Plutarch, drawing on Egyptian sources of the time, connects him with the Greek serpentine monster, Typhon. Despite the obvious persecution of the ancient cult of Seth, in the distant western oasis Seth was still worshipped as the executioner of Apep, even in Ptolemaic times. However, in the Nile Valley, the role of Apep's slayer was taken over by other gods. For example, on the reliefs of the great Ptolemaic temple of Edfu, Horus and Khnum become Apep's executioners. The course of the 12-hour nocturnal journey of the sun also differs from that known to us from the books of the New Kingdom. Instead of the 7th and culminating 12th hour, the execution of the serpent takes place at every hour of the night. The fight practically never ends. Quote, "This spell is to be recited over a figure of Apep, to be put in the fire so that he may burn before Ra when he manifests himself in the morning, at noon tide and likewise in the evening when Ra sets in the west, at the 6th hour of the night, at the 8th hour of the day, at the end of the evening, down to every hour of the day and night, at the festival of the new moon, at the day of the monthly festival, at the 6th-day festival, at the 15-day festival, and likewise every day." Every Egyptian was obliged and determined to repel Apep's attack. At the same time, his existence explained many things. Even if one of the pharaohs did something wrong and fatal in its consequences, he couldn't serve as a negative example, because his elevation to the throne of Egypt would be considered a manifestation of the action of evil forces, Apep or Seth, against the world order. The Egyptians therefore remained vigilant, and traces of their exorcisms on Apep are still found today. His names and images on papyrus vignettes and on bas-reliefs of tombs and temples often bear traces of knife stabbing. Another interesting Apophic ritual was the ritual of striking the ball. This game, practiced at least since the New Kingdom, was in fact very different from sports games. It was an apotropaic curse rite against the enemy of the gods. The round ball symbolized the evil eye of Apep. It was made of clay. Some contained hair, linen, or reed. They were hit with a club or bat to break them completely. So it wasn't the pharaonic version of baseball. On the bas-relief in the Deir el-Bahri temple, Thutmose III, accompanied by the goddess Hathor, performs a ritual with the priests passing him bowls. Hitting the bowls, he recited, "Hathor, you are the mistress of everything, the mistress of all gods, who punishes Apep in heaven. Take the eye of Apep at the place of his execution. His pupil is battered. I destroyed his eyes to gladden your heart, this enemy of your father." In one of the numerous Ptolemaic hymns of Edfu in honor of the victorious Ra, we read, "Be high, O Ra, rejoice, shine. You are high in your highness, while Apep is low in his depth. Come, come, Ra, rise with your beams. There is darkness in the eyes of Apep. Come, come, Ra, you are nice in your kindness. Apep is bad because of his bad deeds. You are the sun god in joy. Your crew is in joy when the protection comes to you every day. Atum rejoices in right and truth. Ra is triumphant over Apep, horns the Bechdetite, justified, great God, Lord of the sky, against his enemies." The recitation of the hymns solemnly declare the successful outcome of the cosmic event that is the presence of Mad, which manifests itself in the victory over Apep. Fully aware of the hidden catastrophe that can stop the course of the sun at any moment, they consciously present a healthy world in order to enchant and strengthen this health which is Mad. Mad is the victory of light over darkness, of movement over stillness, of life over death, and of power over rebellion. All these levels of meaning are included in the victory over Apep. The struggle between Ra and Apep takes the form of a direct cyclical confrontation of two opponents, one of whom triumphs and the other succumbs. The triumphant sun god becomes justified, and thus receives the same epithet as the deceased justified at the judgment of Osiris. So the same word refers to the defeat of death and the defeat of cosmic enemy. The concept of an ancient evil serpent outlived the pharaonic religion. Christian Copts called the biblical Satan Apop. Widely spread since the New Kingdom images of Seth defeating Apep, and especially later Roman depictions of a mounted Horus spearing the monster Apophis Seth may have influenced the Christian iconography of Saint George slaying the dragon, so popular among Egyptian Copts to this day. Apep continues to stimulate the imagination, including that of modern astronomers who gave the name Apophis to an asteroid discovered in 2004, which, in their opinion, poses a real threat of destroying the Earth in the near future. Apep therefore still consistently threatens the return of chaos. I hope you learned something new about the beliefs of ancient Egyptians. Thank you for listening. Please let me know in the comments what you'd like to hear about next time. I'd also like to thank all my patrons. I truly appreciate your contribution. Without you, it wouldn't be possible, you know that. Thank you. If you don't support me yet but would like to, I placed my Patreon link below in the description. Don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye and see you on the next one.